The flight attendant's saccharine smile never wavered as she stepped in front of the stairs, blocking Ava's path. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this lane is for priority guests only." Ava Sinclair didn't blink, didn't flinch. She had built an empire from nothing, shattered glass ceilings in an industry run by men who underestimated her at every turn. And yet, here she was, being dismissed on the steps of her own aircraft. She inhaled slowly, her voice smooth as tempered steel. "Fire the entire crew." The smirk on the co-pilot's face faltered. Marcus, her right-hand man, had already stepped away, phone in hand, dialing. 10 minutes later, security arrived. The stunned flight staff were escorted off the tarmac without ceremony, their protests swallowed by the hum of idling engines. Ava ascended the stairs of her jet, unchallenged, unquestioned, because this wasn't just about a flight. This was about power. And Ava never asked for permission. She took it. Before we go any deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out. The golden hour sun bathed Miami's most exclusive executive airport in a rich, amber glow. The tarmac shimmered with the reflections of multi-million-dollar private jets, sleek and imposing, engines purring in quiet readiness. In the distance, behind tinted glass walls, silent deals were being sealed over flutes of champagne. This was a world of quiet power, of people who never heard the word no. And whether they liked it or not, Ava Sinclair belonged here. She stepped out of the black Rolls-Royce, the sharp click of her Louboutin heels against the pavement slicing through the still air like a declaration. Dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit that hugged her frame with effortless authority, she moved with the confidence of a woman who had fought for every inch of ground she stood on. At 32, she was a name whispered in billion-dollar boardrooms. A CEO who had redefined luxury travel. Skylux Ventures wasn't just another aviation brand. It was an empire, built on exclusivity, efficiency, and Ava's unwavering vision. Tonight, she was en route to London for the most ambitious deal of her career. A merger that would cement her company as the undisputed leader in private aviation. The negotiations had been ruthless, corporate sharks circling, waiting for her to slip. But she didn't slip. She never did. The contract was airtight. The meeting was in less than 12 hours. She needed to be wheels up. Now. She barely acknowledged the valet who opened her door. No time for pleasantries. She checked her phone. No delays, no last-minute changes. Everything running on schedule. Just the way she demanded. Marcus Grant, her executive assistant, was already waiting near the terminal doors, phone in hand. With a silent nod, Ava strode toward her jet, the Aurora X, a fully customized Gulfstream G700. The crown jewel of her fleet. Deep blue exterior gleaming under the Miami sun, silver Skylux insignia emblazoned on the fuselage. This wasn't just a plane. It was a fortress. A statement. A boardroom in the sky where she closed deals that shifted entire markets. Every second counted. No room for mistakes. But then, someone stepped in her path. A woman. Blonde, mid-40s, the stiff posture of someone who had spent her life believing power only belonged to a select few. Her name tag read Rebecca Lawson. Flight attendant. And yet, she stood there like a gatekeeper. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her tone perfectly smooth, perfectly condescending. "This lane is for priority guests only." Ava stared at her, unreadable. Rebecca's expression was polite, practiced, but her eyes held something else. The same look Ava had seen 1,000 times before. The quiet belief that a black woman in luxury must be out of place. "I am a priority guest," Ava said, voice steady. She didn't reach for credentials. She didn't explain herself. The fact that she was standing here, at this jet, should have been enough. Rebecca's smile stayed fixed, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," she said, shifting just enough to keep blocking the stairs. "This aircraft is reserved for a very exclusive clientele. If you need assistance booking an alternate flight, the main terminal has a concierge service that can. Is there a problem here?" The voice was deeper, laced with an arrogance that sent a sharp prickle up Ava's spine. She turned. Derek Foster, co-pilot, mid-50s, graying at the temples, the kind of man who thought his title made him untouchable. He gave her a slow, assessing once-over, the same calculating look she had seen in too many boardrooms, the silent weighing of whether she belonged. Rebecca's voice took on a syrupy sweetness. "I was just explaining to this young lady that she may have taken a wrong turn." Young lady. Not Miss Sinclair. Not ma'am. Young lady. A dismissal wrapped in faux politeness. A quiet way to chip away at her authority, to remind her she was seen as less. Derek's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Ma'am, this isn't a last-minute upgrade situation," he said, arms folding across his chest. "This is a private charter for high-level executives and owners." Ava exhaled slowly, measured. Around them, heads turned. Passengers in the VIP lounge watching, some curious, others amused. No one interjected. No one ever did. She tilted her head, meeting Derek's gaze head-on. "And you think I don't qualify?" He shrugged, clearly enjoying himself. "I just think mistakes happen. Wouldn't be the first time someone assumed access to something that wasn't meant for them." Rebecca hummed in agreement, the corners of her mouth twitching upward. "You're welcome to wait in the lounge, sweetheart," she said, gesturing toward the glass doors. "We'll call you if there's a mix-up." The audacity. The complete and utter certainty in their tones. They truly believed they could diminish her with a few condescending words and a placating smile. That she would shrink back embarrassed. Accept the scraps of respect they decided she was worthy of. She felt Marcus step closer. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. Ava let out one slow, deliberate breath, then reached for her phone. "Fire the entire crew." Her voice was calm. Almost bored. Marcus didn't hesitate. He turned on his heel, phone already dialing. Rebecca and Derek still looked amused. Still thought they had the upper hand. That was going to change in exactly 10 minutes. Marcus's voice was crisp as he spoke into the phone. "Victor, we have an issue. Miss Sinclair has been denied boarding by her own flight crew. I need them removed. Immediately." A pause. Then the inevitable corporate damage control. "Let's handle this professionally," Victor Hayes, the airline executive, said, his tone placating. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. No need to." Ava extended a hand. Marcus handed her the phone without a word. She lifted it to her ear, gaze never leaving the crew in front of her. "Victor," she said, voice like ice, "I am handling it professionally. You have 10 minutes. Silence. Then the inevitable shift in his tone. "Ava, let's be reasonable. Replacing an entire flight crew on short notice. I don't reward incompetence." Ava cut in smoothly. "And I certainly don't tolerate disrespect. If they're not off my aircraft in 10 minutes, my legal team will be having a very different conversation with your board of directors." A sharp inhale on the other end. Victor wasn't stupid. Ava Sinclair wasn't just a high-profile client. She was one of their largest investors. Losing her business wasn't an option. And in exactly 10 minutes, Rebecca and Derek were going to learn that the hard way. "Flight crew has been replaced," Marcus said, voice measured, professional. "We're ready for takeoff." Ava didn't respond right away. She just watched the skyline fade beyond the tinted glass, the city shrinking beneath the growing dusk. Miami's golden hour had given way to deep blues, the first stars flickering into existence. The world kept moving, just like she did. Marcus waited, patient as ever. He knew her moods better than anyone, when to push, when to step back. Right now, she was in the space between past and present, where ghosts whispered and old wounds ached beneath fresh victories. Finally, she exhaled, slow and controlled, the tension in her shoulders easing just enough for Marcus to continue. Victor called back. Wanted to assure you everything was handled discreetly. Ava let out a quiet scoff, shaking her head. Discreetly? His words, not mine. She leaned back in her seat, eyes flicking to the empty runway below. I didn't ask for discretion. I asked for action. And she got it. Rebecca and Derek, two names she would never think of again, were gone. They had strutted onto that runway believing they held power. That people like her still had to prove themselves. That this world, these spaces, these luxuries weren't meant for her. They had been wrong. The cabin door sealed shut with a quiet hiss, the familiar click of the locking mechanism sounding like a period at the end of a sentence. Final. Absolute. Marcus took his usual seat across from her, still scrolling through his phone, always 3 steps ahead. London itinerary is confirmed. Car service will be waiting at the tarmac. I spoke with McAllister. He's expecting you at 10 a.m. sharp. He seemed on edge. Ava arched a brow. Good. He's nervous, Ava. This deal. She waved a hand, already dismissing whatever concerns he was about to voice. He's nervous because he knows he's lost. He just hasn't admitted it yet. McAllister had been circling the deal like a shark for months, looking for cracks, for weaknesses. He had underestimated her. They always did. Marcus hesitated, tapping his fingers against the armrest. She knew that look. What? She asked. The press caught wind of what happened. She tilted her head slightly, intrigued but unsurprised. Some executive at the airport leaked it. Videos already making the rounds online. Flight crew getting escorted off your jet. Security stepping in. Victor looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He smirked. They're calling it the Sinclair takedown. Ava let out a short laugh, low and amused. Of course they are. Do you want me to handle it? She considered it. This wasn't the kind of press she usually cultivated. She preferred controlled narratives, strategic moves, the kind of power that didn't need to be flaunted to be felt. But this? Let them talk. Let them see what happened when someone tried to diminish her. No. She picked up her phone, scrolling briefly through her notifications. Already, her name was trending. Already, the headlines were rolling in. Aviation titan Ava Sinclair shuts down flight crew power play. CEO asserts control over luxury airline in dramatic airport showdown. Who exactly thought it was a good idea to challenge Ava Sinclair? She smirked. Let it play out, she said, crossing one leg over the other. Let them watch. The jet's engines rumbled to life beneath her feet, a low, steady power that resonated through the cabin. The runway stretched ahead, open, endless. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, confirming clearance for takeoff. Ava exhaled, gaze fixed straight ahead as the aircraft began to move. She had places to be, deals to close, worlds to conquer. And nothing, no smirking co-pilot, no condescending flight attendant, no outdated notion of who did or didn't belong, was going to stop her. Option. Ava's fingers drummed against the leather armrest, her mind already moving 10 steps ahead. Fear was a powerful motivator. Grayson was using it to create doubt, to make them question her. But fear could be redirected. If they were afraid of instability, she would show them that letting Grayson in was the real risk. Schedule an emergency call with Titan's key investors, she said, voice clipped, decisive. Not just the board, the shareholders. the people who actually have skin in the game. Naomi didn't hesitate. I'll have them on the line in an hour. Ava smirked. That was the difference between her and Elliot. He played politics. She played for keeps. The SUV pulled up to the hotel, sleek and towering in the heart of Manhattan. The driver barely had time to open the door before Ava was stepping out, Marcus matching her pace as they strode through the lobby. Eyes turned. Some whispered. The headlines had done their work. People were watching, waiting to see if she'd stumble. She wouldn't. Marcus held out his tablet as they entered the elevator. The legal team sent over the compiled report on Grayson. She took it, scanning the first few pages. Stock manipulations, fraudulent asset transfers, corporate bullying disguised as strategic restructuring. He had spent years building a reputation as a financial mastermind, but all it took was peeling back the layers to see the cracks. Anything I can use immediately? Marcus tapped the screen. This one. She read, then laughed. Oh, Elliot. You really thought no one would find this? A buried SEC complaint from 2 years ago. An acquisition where Grayson had manipulated valuation reports to force a buyout at a fraction of its worth. The deal had been quietly settled, swept under the rug. It wasn't illegal, not in the way that would get him arrested. But in the court of public opinion? In the eyes of the Titan board? It was lethal. She handed the tablet back as the elevator doors slid open. Draft a leak. Nothing direct, just enough to make the right people start asking questions. Marcus nodded. Anonymous source? Ava smirked. Let's make it a concerned industry executive. Since he loves those so much. They reached her suite, a sprawling corner room overlooking the city. Naomi was already waiting inside, pacing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone in hand. Board meeting's locked for 10 a.m. But we've got a problem. Ava arched a brow. Define problem. Naomi turned, eyes sharp. Grayson just booked a private dinner with Hawthorne tonight. Silence stretched for half a second. Then Ava smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. Good. Marcus blinked. Good? Ava walked to the window, looking down at the city pulsing beneath her. Grayson thought he was moving first, that he had the upper hand. He had no idea. Book me a table at the same restaurant, she said smoothly. Make sure Hawthorne sees me. Naomi's smirk mirrored her own. Oh, I like where this is going. Ava turned, the fire in her gaze unmistakable. Elliot wants a war? I'll give him one. And by the time I'm done, he won't just lose Titan Aerotech. He'll lose everything. Finality. We've made our decision. The room fell silent. All eyes locked onto him. Ava didn't move. She didn't so much as blink. She had played this game long enough to know that the final moments before a verdict were the most dangerous. The moment where power could slip through your fingers if you weren't careful. But she wasn't worried. Not really. Hawthorne exhaled slowly, his gaze flicking from Ava to Elliot, then back again. Titan Aerotech will be moving forward with Sinclair's proposal. Boom! For a fraction of a second, the weight of those words seemed to suck the air from the room. The tension that had gripped the board members, the carefully controlled expressions, all gave way to a quiet shift of finality. Some nodded, already accepting the outcome. Others exchanged brief, knowing glances. And then there was Elliot. A muscle jumped in his jaw. His knuckles whitened against the polished wood of the table. For the first time in all the years she had known him, he looked blindsided. He recovered quickly. He always did. But Ava saw the flicker of panic in his eyes before he schooled his expression into something resembling calm. He forced a smile, slow and deliberate, but it didn't reach his eyes. Bold choice, Daniel, he said smoothly, leaning back as if this didn't matter. as if this wasn't a loss that would cost him more than just Titan Aerotech. I hope she delivers. Ava let the smirk she had been holding back curl at the edges of her lips. She didn't gloat, didn't rub it in, she didn't have to. Because Elliot Grayson didn't lose. Not like this. Not in public. And yet, here he was, sitting in a boardroom full of people who had just watched him be outmaneuvered, outplayed, and outclassed. The moment stretched. Tension still crackled in the air. But Ava? She simply stood, smoothing the front of her blazer before gathering the remaining documents from the table. She moved with the slow, measured confidence of someone who had already won, who had known from the second she walked into this room that she would be walking out victorious. She turned to Hawthorne and extended a hand. He took it without hesitation. Titan Aerotech won't regret this, she said, firm. Certain. Hawthorne nodded, his expression unreadable but approving. See that we don't. And with that, it was done. Ava turned without another glance at Elliot and strode for the door, Marcus falling into step beside her. The second they stepped into the hallway, he let out a breath, shaking his head. You really did that. She smirked, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve. Of course I did. Naomi's voice crackled through her phone, already calling in from another city. I assume you're walking out with the win? Ava lifted the phone to her ear, the corners of her lips curling. Oh, she said, stepping into the waiting elevator, her reflection sharp in the mirrored walls. I didn't just win. I ended him. Elliot's chair scraped against the polished floor as he shot to his feet, the sharp sound slicing through the air like a blade. You can't be serious. His voice was tight, barely controlled, his composure cracking in real time. Hawthorne barely spared him a glance. We are. Elliot let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head like he was witnessing something absurd. This is a mistake, a massive mistake. Ava's leadership is a liability. And when this deal blows up in your faces, don't come looking for me to clean up the mess. Ava finally turned to him, her expression unreadable, but there was something cold and cutting behind her eyes. A sharp contrast to Elliot's barely restrained frustration. You should get used to this feeling, she said smoothly. It's what happens when the smarter option wins. His nostrils flared. His hands curled into fists before he forced himself to relax. He adjusted his suit jacket, straightened his tie, a man trying to reclaim the dignity that had just been ripped from him in front of the most powerful people in the room. But his eyes, they burned. Fury. Humiliation. Without another word, he turned and stalked out of the boardroom, his footsteps heavy with defeat. The silence he left behind was thick, but Ava didn't let it linger. She turned back to Hawthorne, extended a hand. I look forward to building something great together. Hawthorne took it in a firm shake. Welcome to Titan Aerotech, Miss Sinclair. And just like that, it was done. The fog came fast. The next morning, Marcus strolled into Ava's penthouse suite, phone in hand, an amused smirk tugging at his lips. He placed the device down on the sleek marble counter, shaking his head. Rebecca and Derek are suing. Ava didn't even look up from her laptop, where she was reviewing the final acquisition paperwork. Of course they are. Marcus leaned against the counter, scrolling through the complaint. Wrongful termination. Claiming you fired them without cause and damaged their reputations. He chuckled, eyes scanning the legal jargon. Derek's even trying to spin it like you were the unprofessional one. Apparently, he thinks he can paint himself as the reasonable one in this situation. Now, Ava glanced up. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a sharp, calculating glint in her eyes. And the media? Marcus smirked. Oh, they're picking it up. But not in the way Rebecca and Derek wanted. Turns out, the public doesn't have a lot of sympathy for a crew that refused service to the owner of the plane. He tapped the screen. Still, Some outlets are framing it as another example of you being too cutthroat. Ava sighed, closing her laptop. Then let's end this quickly. She picked up her phone and dialed Patricia Lewis, her lead attorney. Tell opposing counsel that if they'd like to continue with this ridiculous lawsuit, I'd be happy to release the full security footage from that day. Unedited. With audio. She let the words settle. The footage that shows Rebecca refusing to check my name on the manifest. Derek dismissing me like I was trespassing. Their entire pattern of unprofessionalism on display. She let the silence stretch for just a beat before adding, and let them know that if they pursue this further, I'll countersue for defamation. Patricia chuckled on the other end. Understood. I'll have this dismissed by the end of the week. Ava hung up, setting the phone down with a quiet click. That should take care of it. And it did. By the time the footage was made available to both legal teams, Rebecca and Derek's case fell apart. Their attorneys withdrew within days, realizing there was no ground to stand on. The story faded from the news cycle just as quickly as it had appeared. And Ava? She moved forward. Without hesitation. Without regret. Because she had one. Again. The jet hummed beneath her as she stepped on board, the familiar scent of leather and citrus welcoming her like an old friend. This was her space. Her world. And now, everything inside of it ran exactly as it should. The new crew stood in perfect formation. Poised. Professional. And most importantly, respectful. The lead flight attendant, Adrian Lewis, greeted her with a warm but polished smile. Welcome aboard, Miss Sinclair. We're honored to have you. Ava gave a small nod, taking in the subtle differences. No hesitation. No questioning glances. No underlying tension. Just seamless efficiency. Thank you, she said simply, then moved toward her seat. She settled by the window, exhaling as she watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in deep gold and violet. The engines thrummed, steady and powerful, carrying her higher and farther than ever before. She wasn't just flying. She was soaring. Then her phone buzzed. A single message from Naomi. Elliot won't back down. Stay ready. Ava's lips curled into a slow, knowing smirk. She tapped out a response, her fingers moving with practiced ease. I always am. Because power? It wasn't about money. It wasn't about status. It was about control. Control over your own narrative. Over the spaces you entered. Over the respect you demanded. Ava Sinclair knew that better than anyone. She had spent her entire life proving that she belonged in rooms where people like her were often overlooked, dismissed, or outright challenged. And when she was told, again, that she wasn't supposed to be there, she didn't ask for permission. She took action. But now, the question is yours. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to tell you that you didn't belong? Maybe it was subtle, a glance, a hesitation, an assumption that you weren't important enough to be where you were. Maybe it was direct, words meant to undermine you, rules that only seemed to apply when you walked through the door. When that moment came, how did you respond? Did you fight back? Did you let it slide? And if you could go back, would you do anything differently? Ava didn't negotiate. She didn't try to change their minds. She removed the problem. Immediately. Was that the right call? Or should she have taken a different approach? Would you have done the same in her position? Or do you believe in handling things more diplomatically? The conversation doesn't end here. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Ava's response a power move? Or an overreaction? Would you have stood your ground the same way? Let's talk. Because Ava Sinclair didn't ask for respect. She took it. And in a world that constantly tries to push you aside, waiting for permission is the quickest way to be forgotten. She had spent years proving she was more than capable. more than worthy, more than enough. And still, there were those who looked at her and saw only what they wanted to see. Someone who didn't belong. Someone they thought they could ignore, dismiss, or control. But Ava had learned a long time ago, the only way to change the rules was to refuse to play by them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg for fairness. She acted. She removed the obstacles in her way, without hesitation. And in doing so, she sent a message. One that no one in that airport, no one in that boardroom, and certainly no one like Elliot Grayson would ever forget. Respect isn't given. It's taken. And when the world tries to tell you that you don't belong, that you're too much, too ambitious, too bold, show them that you do. Show them that you earned your place, that you built your seat at the table, that you are not waiting for approval from people who were never meant to define your worth in the first place. Ava Sinclair didn't just fire a flight crew that day. She fired a warning shot. She didn't just secure a business deal. She secured her legacy. And now, the question is, when the moment comes for you to decide whether you'll shrink back or stand firm, what will you do?